Jose Mourinho has issued a chilling ultimatum over club legend Iker Casillas while finalizing his dramatic return to Real Madrid. The explosive development comes as the Portuguese manager agrees to a 2-year deal to take control during a period of major turmoil behind the scenes. The news hits Spanish football like a thunderclap. Fabrizio Romano posted on X breaking: Jose Mourinho back to Real Madrid. Here we go. All terms have been verbally agreed between Jose Mourinho and Real Madrid, waiting to sign all documents. Within hours, transfer insider Florian Plettenberg piled on: Jose Mourinho back to Real Madrid. Done deal. Full verbal agreement now reached as expected. Contract planned at least until 2028. The football world stopped. 13 years after Mourinho walked out of the Santiago Bernabéu with his tail between his legs and a dressing room in flames behind him. He was walking back in, and for one man watching all of this unfold from his phone screen, it was enough to ignite a very old fire. Iker Casillas was one of those who spoke out against Jose Mourinho's possible return with a message on social media. "I don't have any problems with Mourinho. I think he's a great professional. I don't want him at Real Madrid. Other managers would be more prepared to manage the club of my life. Personal opinion, nothing else." The former goalkeeper knows the club better than most, so his opinion carries a lot of weight. That post landed like a grenade, not because it was hysterical or melodramatic. Quite the opposite. It was calm, measured, and devastatingly clear. And from a man with the biography of Iker Casillas, calm and measured cuts deeper than any tantrum. Casillas, who won 5 La Liga titles and 3 Champions Leagues during a 16-year stay at Real Madrid, which included playing under Mourinho, admits that he does not agree with his proposed return. This was not some pundit firing off takes for engagement. This was the captain, the goalkeeper who defined the club's identity for a generation. The man who was there inside the dressing room when Mourinho's methods split Real Madrid's world in half. But Casillas wasn't done with just one post. Days later, as the Mourinho links intensified and the Spanish press went into overdrive, he returned to social media with something even more pointed. He wrote "Tirap la culata," a Spanish expression meaning backfire, on his official X profile, with every indication it was directed at the Mourinho appointment. And then on May 22nd, he went nuclear. Casillas posted a full list of 10 managers he believed Real Madrid should have appointed instead of Mourinho. Unai Emery, Vincent Kompany, C. Alonso, Cesc Fabregas, Mikel Arteta, Andoni, Iraola, Zinedine, Zidane, Jorge, Bordalas, Inigo Perez, Vicente Del Bosque. That was the list. 10 names, 10 alternatives, 10 public arguments for why the man about to be announced as Real Madrid's next manager should not be the man about to be announced as Real Madrid's next manager. Even so, it would not be completely surprising if there were some personal issues between them, since Mourinho was manager during Casillas' time at Real Madrid. What actually happened between these two men at Real Madrid between 2010 and 2013 is a story about power, control, betrayal, and what happens when the world's most obsessive manager collides with the most untouchable institution at the world's most scrutinized football club. And now, with Mourinho on the verge of walking back through those gates, that story is not history. It is happening right now in real time with very real consequences. And one of those consequences is that the club's greatest ever goalkeeper is screaming from the rooftops, "Get him out." To understand why Casillas is so furious and why Florentino Perez apparently couldn't care less, you have to understand the precise chaos that is consuming Real Madrid right now. Because the situation in 2026 has an almost disturbing symmetry with the situation in 2010 when Mourinho first arrived. Despite their strong start to the season, Real Madrid ended the campaign in disappointing fashion as Barcelona secured the La Liga title. As a result, Los Blancos have now gone 2 consecutive years without major silverware, reflecting poor decision-making and flawed squad planning. 2 consecutive troughless seasons at Real Madrid. In the context of this club, that is not a rough patch. It is a crisis. The decision comes after increasing reports of internal friction inside the Real Madrid dressing room. Throughout the season, sources in Spain have repeatedly suggested that tensions between key players, coaching staff, and club leadership became a growing issue during the campaign, particularly amid concerns surrounding team discipline, tactical balance, and the management of superstar personalities. It is believed that Perez is the main driving force behind Mourinho heading back to Real Madrid, with the club having missed out to Barcelona again for the La Liga title, and also dealing with Kylian Mbappe's drops and ugly events behind the scenes following the recent bust-up between teammates Federico Valverde and Aurelien Tchouameni. A dressing room fight between two first-team players. Sanctions handed out, and according to reports, several important Real Madrid players subsequently requested Valverde's departure in the summer of 2026. The dressing room is not just dysfunctional, it is fractured. Madrid are currently 11 points behind champions Barcelona in La Liga with one round of games left to play. They were eliminated from the Champions League quarterfinals by Bayern Munich, having overcome Mourinho's Benfica in the knockout phase playoffs. And it gets messier at the managerial level. Álvaro Arbeloa has been in temporary charge of Real Madrid since Xabi Alonso was sacked in January, 7 months into the job. Xabi Alonso, one of the most celebrated midfielders of his generation, a figure of dignity and intelligence, was sacked after just 7 months. Before him, it was Ancelotti who left. The revolving door at the Bernabeu has been spinning so fast that it has created its own wind. Real Madrid understands that the current context of the squad needs a profile like Mourinho's personality, leadership, competitive tension, and the capacity to withstand extreme pressure. That is exactly what they believe the dressing room lacks right now. Consequently, as other options fell away or generated doubts, Mourinho's figure gained strength until he became the choice of Florentino Perez to lead the new project. Sky Sports News chief correspondent Cave Solikal raised the questions everyone in football was asking. How will Vinicius Jr. feel about Jose Mourinho coming to Real Madrid? And will it have any kind of impact on his decision whether to extend his contract at Real Madrid or not? Also, Mourinho has to sort out this issue that Real Madrid have had all season. Can you have a Real Madrid team with both Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius in it? Perez thinks Mourinho is the kind of character who has the personality to sort out this Real Madrid dressing room once and for all. Meanwhile, Mourinho himself had been playing it characteristically close to his chest. Speaking after the Portuguese league season concluded, Mourinho admitted that his agent, Jorge Mendes, had been in contact with Madrid while he had also received a contract renewal offer from Benfica. "My future should be decided this week," Mourinho said. He knew exactly where he was going. He just wanted the world to sweat for a little longer before he told them. On Monday, Mourinho informed Benfica president Rui Costa that he would reject their renewal offer, which would have guaranteed him a salary increase and 2 more years in Lisbon. Benfica's unbeaten regular season, a run through the Portuguese league without a single defeat, was not enough to keep him. The lure of the Bernabeu is a gravity that very few managers can escape. Initially seen as an outside bet, the 63-year-old Benfica manager, who led Real Madrid between 2010 and 2013, had important fans in the form of Florentino Perez and Kylian Mbappe, who was spotted liking a post on Instagram promoting Mourinho's potential return. Even Mbappe, whose future at the club is itself a burning question, was hinting at where his loyalties lie in this appointment debate. And Casillas, watching all of this from the outside, he posted those 3 words, "Tiro Paculata, backfire," as if he already knows how this ends. Here is where things get genuinely fascinating, because this was not a case of Mourinho sitting patiently, hat in hand, waiting to be given a job. Mourinho walked into these negotiations with demands, conditions that had to be met before he would put pen to paper. He did not return to Real Madrid. He returned to Real Madrid on his terms. Despite these developments, Mourinho was not willing to return under just any conditions, as confirmed by Sergio Valentin. The manager put forward 3 demands. If he was to take over the Real Madrid bench next season, the first condition concerned contract length. Mourinho reportedly wanted a guaranteed 2-year deal, giving him enough time to rebuild and stabilize the project properly rather than working under immediate short-term pressure. That demand makes complete sense in context. The last 2 managers at this club, Xabi Alonso and Arbeloa, had their tenures destroyed before they could establish anything. Alonso was sacked 7 months in. Mourinho has seen what happens when a manager doesn't have the president's full backing, and he has no intention of repeating that experience. Mourinho's future 2-year contract with Real Madrid will feature an automatic 1-year extension. If the Portuguese manager wins La Liga, according to a report published on AS, so the baseline is 2 years, but there is a built-in incentive wired directly into the contract's DNA. Win the league and a 3rd year activates automatically. If Mourinho wins La Liga during the deal, the contract automatically activates an option for a 3rd season, potentially extending his stay until 2029. That is not just a contract. That is a challenge issue to the man himself, a dare embedded in the small print. The second request was linked to media responsibilities. During his first spell at Real Madrid, Mourinho often became the public face, defending the club through constant controversy and tension. This time, the Portuguese coach wanted a different structure. He only wished to appear in mandatory football-related press conferences and discuss first-team sporting matters. That demand reportedly came from the exhaustion Mourinho experienced during his previous years in Madrid, when he frequently felt isolated while defending the club publicly. Anyone who lived through the 2010-2013 era knows exactly what this refers to. The press conferences that became theater, the finger in the eye of Tito Villanova, the staged provocations, the isolation Mourinho described in his own words. He does not want to be the club's gladiator in the media arena this time. He wants to coach football, win games, and leave the political warfare to someone else. The third condition may be the most sensitive, as Mourinho wants complete control over his own coaching staff. That would mean arriving with his trusted team and potentially moving away from several figures currently involved behind the scenes. The report specifically claims that Antonio Piniz would not form part of Mourinho's plans. Although the Portuguese coach would not oppose Álvaro Arbeloa remaining connected to the first team in some capacity, Sky Sports News understands Mourinho will take 4 coaches with him from Benfica to the Bernabeu. His trusted inner circle travels with him wherever he goes. That is the Mourinho doctrine. The bubble must be his sealed from outside interference. The first demand also relates to the level of influence he will hold over the club's recruitment strategy and transfer activity. Mourinho is reportedly seeking a significant voice in Decision M, specifically regarding the positions that need strengthening rather than just individual names. His current view is that the squad is unbalanced in several key areas. During his first stint in Madrid, he was instrumental in the arrivals of Luka Modric, Mas Oil, and Sami Khedira, and he expects similar authority to fix what he perceives as a lopsided roster. Mourinho has requested stability and time from Florentino Perez to develop his project, aiming to shield himself from early dismissal rumors like those that plagued Xabi Alonso earlier in the season. So far, Florentino Perez's response has been, "We'll talk about it." The Madrid president is understood to have told Mourinho's camp that discussions would continue without immediately agreeing to the requested conditions, which in Perez language essentially means yes. Because when Florentino Perez wants a manager badly enough, "We'll talk about it" is his version of handing you the keys. The buyout clause allowing Mourinho to leave Benfica expires on May 26, meaning the deal is highly likely to be made official before next Tuesday. This date also lines up with the expected conclusion of Madrid's presidential elections. The clock was ticking. The window to make this move was narrow, and Real Madrid were not going to let it close. Reports from Spanish outlet Fajis claim Mourinho has requested and chosen Manchester City star Rodri as his first big signing for around €60 million. Rodri, the World Cup winner, the Ballon d'Or holder, the engine of every team he plays for, as the first piece of the rebuild. That is not small thinking. That is a statement of intent. To fully feel the weight of what Casillas is doing right now, you need to go back to the beginning. You need to go back to 2010, when a Portuguese manager walked into the most historic club in football history and immediately set it on fire. When Mourinho arrived at Real Madrid, the goalkeeper was nothing less than a living Bernabeu legend. Newly crowned as world champion following Spain's World Cup victory in 2010, Casillas was at his peak at the age of 30 and already boasted 3 Liga titles, 2 Champions Leagues. He was not just the starting goalkeeper, he was the spiritual backbone of the club. The captain, the conscience, Casillas was a legend in both Spain and Real Madrid at this point. He held a huge amount of influence both in the dressing room and with the Spanish press. The minute Mourinho was hired, there were reports of disagreements between the manager and the captain. Mourinho, it appears till Daba labeled Casillas as the infiltrator of the squad, the one who gave information to journalists about what was happening inside the team. That is why the Portuguese in his time said that the communication between both was not very important. Speaking of Casillas, this suspicion did not come from nowhere. Back in August 2011, Casillas and GI shared a common concern. "We have to fix this." The two captains decided as clashes between Real Madrid and Barcelona, with Mourinho often in the thick of the action, were becoming increasingly bitter occasions for the sake of the Spain national team. And through a series of friendly phone calls, the pair negotiated an uneasy peace for the upcoming Supercopa. They were widely lauded for their diplomacy for the most part. Mourinho, however, took grave exception to the pact and considered Casillas' actions as a sign of weakness and a betrayal. In Mourinho's world, you do not call the enemy. You do not negotiate. You do not extend olive branches to the opposition captain. And the fact that Casillas did exactly that without asking his manager's permission because of his own moral compass was for Mourinho the original sin. From that moment, the trust between them was irreparably broken. The 2011-12 season was Mourinho's finest in Madrid. Real Madrid won La Liga with 100 points and scored 121 goals. A record-shattering campaign that temporarily papered over the cracks. But those cracks were structural, and the 2012-13 season tore them wide open. As results in 2012-13 failed to match the heights of the previous season, and Tito Villanova's Barca waltzed to the title. Casillas was singled out as the source of Madrid's malaise. Just like his predecessor, as captain Raúl sold off to Shelley in Mourinho's very first days at the club. The goalkeeper found his legendary status no protection against the vagaries of the coach's decisions. On January 23, 2013, Casillas fractured his left hand during a Copa del Rey match against Valencia. The break came as a result of a kick from teammate Alvaro Arbeloa, the same Arbeloa who would later manage the club in 2026, who was trying to clear a corner that Casillas had missed. After a few minutes of medical attention, Casillas was forced to exit the game. With Casillas out, Mourinho decided to bring in a reinforcement. 2 days after Casillas' injury, Real Madrid signed Sevilla goalkeeper Diego López. And when Casillas returned from injury, he did not return to the starting lineup. Diego López was drafted in from Sevilla and immediately got the nod as Madrid's starting keeper, with Casillas relegated to the bench for the first time since he broke into the men 11 as a teenager. The reaction was seismic. The Spanish press erupted. Casillas was not just any player being dropped. He was San Ica, the national treasure, the man who had saved Spain in the 2010 World Cup final and defined a generation of Spanish football. Being benched by Mourinho felt like an act of deliberate provocation. Pepe, Mourinho's own countryman, defended Casillas. There needs to be a little more respect to Ica. He's well loved. What the coach said was not the most appropriate. Ica is a player who is part of Madrid. He's an institution both in this club and in Spain. The 50-year-old coach responded by dropping Pepe. That is the Mourinho playbook. Speak up for someone. He's decided to freeze out and you get frozen out too. Casillas later explained, "I understand that there were people who had it in for me with my issue with Mourinho. I kept quiet for the good of the club so as not to be creating a circus when the situation was not good." And later, in a remarkable moment of reflection, Casillas confessed something even more striking. "I think if it happened all over again, I would have taken the bull by the horns and faced Mourinho. He kept quiet then. He is not keeping quiet now." So, here we are in May 2026, and the man who Mourinho once froze out, dropped and accused of being a mole inside the dressing room, has turned to social media and issued what can only be described as a very public, very pointed ultimatum. Casillas named 10 managers Real Madrid should have hired instead of Mourinho. Unai Emery, Vincent Kompany, Xabi Alonso, Cesc Fabregas, Mikel Arteta, Andoni Iraola, Zinedine Zidane, Jorge Bordalás, Íñigo Perez, Vicente del Bosque. 10 names, each one a deliberate argument. Each one a public statement of what Real Madrid could have been. If they had only asked a different question, consider the names for a moment. Casillas was part of Real Madrid from 1999 to 2015, a period in which the club added to its history with titles of all kinds. The goalkeeper himself won 18 trophies and was a major part of those successes. He is not throwing names at a wall. He knows this club. He knows these managers, and he knows exactly what he is saying by listing them. Unai Emery, who just won the Europa League with Aston Villa. Mikel Arteta, who rebuilt Arsenal into genuine title contenders. Xabi Alonso, his own former teammate, who was sacked mid-season, but whose methods had drawn admiration across European football. Zinedine Zidane, who won 3 consecutive Champions Leagues at the Bernabeu. These are not obscure suggestions. They are a prosecution's case for why Mourinho was the wrong choice. Casillas is one of Real Madrid's great modern symbols, and his own history with Mourinho makes the answer impossible to ignore. The message was measured, but still firm. Casillas did not attack Mourinho's ability. He simply argued that Real Madrid should look elsewhere. But the detail that makes all of this far more than just one man venting is the fact that it is landing at a very specific moment. The announcement will not be made official until Florentino Perez is re-elected as Real Madrid president, something which could take a few weeks if Enrique Raquelme confirms his candidacy. There is a presidential election happening at this club. The deal is verbally agreed, but it has not been signed. The door is technically still open, even if in reality it is barely ajar. Mourinho's highly anticipated future as the next Real Madrid manager is completely settled, and only the official announcement is currently pending. A verbal agreement between the Portuguese coach and his agent Jorge Mendes is now complete on essential terms like contract length and salary, leaving only the formal signature. After ending 2-0-1-2-1-3 trophyless, Mourinho described the season as the worst of his career. While his increasingly belligerent behavior had alienated a significant portion of the roster and fanbase in the 13 years since his Madrid exit, he has won just one league title at any club. Chelsea in 2-0-1-4-5. That is the number that stings 13 years. One league title. The man who once walked into the Bernabeu as the most feared manager in Europe has spent over a decade collecting the debris of brilliant starts and spectacular collapses at Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham, Roma, and now Benfica. Mourinho was also offered the Real Madrid job in 2021, but had to turn it down then because he had already given his verbal word and contractual word to Roma. Carlo Ancelotti went to Real Madrid having been sacked from his two previous jobs, Bayern Munich and Napoli, and finishing 10th with Everton. Eyebrows were raised similarly then. We know how that ended. That is Sky Sports' Cave Sol Cole making the most direct comparison possible, pointing out that the last time people wrote off a returning manager at the Bernabeu, that manager went on to win the Champions League. Florentino Perez is believed to view Mourinho as the ideal coach to restore order inside the squad and re-establish a stronger competitive mentality at the club. One of the key elements of the agreement reportedly involves granting Mourinho significant authority over dressing room control and squad planning. Perez is understood to have assured the Portuguese coach that he will have the freedom to impose stricter standards and reshape the squad according to his vision. The second condition outlined by Mourinho involves the internal structure of the club. While he is not necessarily demanding a total overhaul of the sporting department, he is insistent that the hierarchy and the autonomy of the coaching staff be strictly respected. For Mourinho, the first team bubble must carry his personal seal free from external interference. That might destabilize the dressing room. This request stems from a desire to avoid the kind of friction witnessed this season, such as the tensions involving Vinicius Jr. and previous coach Xabi Alonso. He wants a cohesive environment where the coach's word remains law within the sporting parcel of the organization. In other words, Mourinho is returning with one clear message built into his contract structure. My dressing room, my rules, my staff, my signings. External noise, whether it comes from the media, from disgruntled players, or from legendary former goalkeepers posting lists on social media, will not be welcome. And that ultimately is what makes Casillas' campaign so fascinating and so futile at the same time. The reason Mourinho is back in the conversation is not nostalgia alone. Reports have linked him with Real Madrid because the club is searching for control after another difficult season and growing questions around the current project. Mourinho is currently at Benfica, but his name has resurfaced because Perez has long valued managers who can impose authority quickly. That is the part of the argument that makes his return plausible. Every concern Casillas is raising, the dressing room friction, the power struggles, the personality clashes, is precisely the reason Perez chose Mourinho. Where Casillas sees a warning, Perez sees a solution. The same qualities that made Mourinho's first spell at Real Madrid combustible are in Perez's reading of 2026. Exactly what the doctor ordered. The question is whether Casillas is right about what those qualities ultimately produce, because in the end, even Mourinho's most legendary seasons at Real Madrid ended in a collapse. So complete that he himself called it the worst of his career. Although their partnership was rather short-lived, Mourinho joined Real Madrid in 2010 and left in 2013. By the end of Mourinho's tenure as head coach, he and Casillas could barely even speak to one another. Now those two men are about to be connected to the same club again. Not as manager and player. That particular battle is long over, but as two opposing forces in the narrative of an institution that has not figured out what it wants to be without a trophy in its hands. Mourinho is coming back with a contract, a staff, a list of transfer targets and conditions he insisted upon before he would sign. Casillas is sitting on the outside looking in, having named 10 alternatives and posted a word that means backfire. And somewhere in the middle of all of this is Real Madrid, the most scrutinized, most demanding, most impossible football club on the planet. About to find out which of these two men was